back to Third Age Reforged, and when I was in this battle I did feel the need to get it out very quickly because it is a 8-player Horton scenario which I've not been a part of for quite some time, and indeed most of the Horton scenarios lately have been slightly smaller affairs, so just the fact that this was a full-size one in the old school sense of the word is pleasing to me, and also it's a very good map. It's a very nice battle, I think. And it's a much better advertisement, I think, for Horton's Discord and the setting up of his scenarios than the last one was, which was unfortunately riddled with bugs and very laggy for reasons which I can't really comprehend because it wasn't a very huge battle by any means. Regardless, this one is a 3v5, with of course 5 orc armies besieging a defensive position, which in this case is sort of a hill with a settlement, and there's some open farmland where the defenders can use some of their quite nasty cavalry to their advantage if they don't get it stuck on all of our orcs and wargs. But yes, we'll go through the army compositions, and we first of all have Brainy Smurf playing as the Woodland Realms, and the Woodland Realms here in their full force. This might be one of the last times that I'm able to show how brutal the Woodland Realms can be when their elite units are on display before the next patch. Maybe, we'll see. I mean, most of the time the Woodland Realms are not really picked and they aren't really able to bring all of their good stuff because of how expensive it is, but in this situation when you're outnumbered by 2 armies you need all the help you can get, and the Woodland Realms certainly have the best skirmish line in the game at the moment. So we have some Hiri Bang here at the front. I believe there's 2 units of them back here, and I'll go through the army compositions as best I can. Hopefully I'll be able to get the graphics up for the army compositions now. We also have a catapult up here on this hill position. It's going to be very, very potent indeed as well. And then over here we have 2 more units of Hiri Bang. So these guys are not very well armoured. They tend to lose skirmish fights a lot of the time, but in this situation when you're up against the orcs and when you have such a brilliant firing position, there's no way they're going to be losing any sort of skirmish fight here. We also have here the Elder Royal Council. I believe this is the General's unit. No, it isn't. But either way, this is the best single skirmisher unit that the Woodland Realms has to offer. The Elder Royal Council, of course, very much in the same vein as the Nolda Elder Nobles and the Galathram Veteran Warriors, both of which are very, very strong. More so the Nolda Elder Nobles. And then over here we have a unit of Elder Royal Guard, which again is similar. They have slightly worse stats at range, but they do have axes, which means they are AP and melee. In my opinion, this is similar to how the Rudar Berserkers are for Gundabad. This is the unit which really underpins how overpowered the Woodland Realms really are, because you can really... This unit alone can carry the battle most of the time when you play as the Woodland Realms. If you go defensive, I believe he's got another unit of these guys somewhere around here as well, but I'm sure we'll run into those fairly soon. We also have another one. There's also some rules attributed to this settlement, but we'll go through them as it becomes relevant. The defenders, of course, have no rules attributed to them. We have a unit of Hiri Lang, of course. Elven 2-hander swordsmen are not armor piercing, but their skill is very high. They're difficult to kill, and they will carve through lightly armoured units with impunity. And then over here we have the slightly more defensive themed Hira and Ek, the spearmen. Very good elven spears. They will hold the line against superior numbers of orcs, particularly if those orcs happen to be AP, because of course the Woodland Realms don't rely on their armour, it's skill, which the orcs certainly don't rely on. Here's the other unit of Elder Royal Guard, of course, already talked about them. Then we have the Woodland Realms. This is also something else which puts them above and beyond the High Elves. Their cavalry contingent is stronger. The Elder Pathfinders have hit points and are very deadly off the charge. They are potentially quite vulnerable to arrows and to an attritional type battle, but they are still very, very deadly. And then what underpins them is the Elder Kingsguard, of course. The Elder Kingsguard being one of the strongest units of cavalry in the game as it stands at the moment. The Knights of Numinous and Calanadon Knights are probably stronger, all things considered, but these guys are faster than they are, and they still have the mass to pull through. So if you have good micro, I would even argue that these guys are currently the best cavalry unit in the game, particularly when you consider that they're alongside the best skirmish force to reinforce them. Regardless, we'll move on to another unit of Hiri Lang, of course, here, and then next to them, all 3 of the highest Elder units for the Woodland Realms are here, because the Elder Palace Guard here, the infantry contingent, the single strongest unit of infantry in the game at the moment. They dwarf even the Temple Inquisitors in terms of melee. Very, very deadly, very difficult to kill as well, so we're going to have our work cut out with 63 of these lads. And then we have another unit of Hira and Ek, so you can see there's no chaff in the Woodland Realms army at all. They're all very, very strong. And over here we have some Hiri Lang. Then over here we have some Hiri Dirith, so another unit of, well, a sword and shield unit, very strong, not very reliant on their armour, very skilled indeed, so they're going to be able to hold the line very effectively. And then we have another unit of hit point spearmen, and then we also have one unit of Avari Elder Pikemen. Of course, they have the Halberdier animation, which means next to other really elite pikes, they aren't quite as good, but they are still going to be very good at reinforcing those spears at holding a line. That much is very certain. So now we'll move on to the other well, one of his allies anyway, the dwarves, played by a godless Neemhain, who is the one hosting this scenario, I believe. You may know him as Outfit on the Discord, Horton's Discord anyway. I believe he's on the official one as well. I think I've seen him around. We also have some, well, the dwarves have some Ironfoot crossbowmen, and of course this is really what the Woodland Realms lack, the crossbows in terms of skirmish contingent, so the dwarves do at least fill out that for them. The Ironfoot crossbows as well, you know, very good. They're going to be on the same sort of vein as the Uruk-hai crossbowmen in terms of how effective they are in the current patch, and then of course over here, the amount of elites they have is no different. They have some guards of Khazad-dûm. They also have some hammers of Gundabad. The hammers of Gundabad, of course, not quite as strong. They have lower hit points. Their defense isn't quite so good either, but they are still very effective shock troops. So if they see the opportunity to really carve into our army as it moves forward, they should really take it. Also back here we have some Axemen of Erebor, slightly more armoured, but less hit points, but better stats, I believe. Again, I've fallen out of touch with the stats a little bit since I decided to forego it until the next patch, but the next patch has taken longer than I thought it would, so hopefully I can get back into that pretty soon. We also have some Erebor infantry over here. Armour piercing, 2 hit points, sort of very standard dwarven fare. Some Sons of the Fallen, they're going to be excellent at holding the line, alongside these very efficient Ironfoot halberdiers. Again, you rarely see a dwarven army without Ironfoot halberdiers and Ironfoot warriors. But over here we have some Ironfoot Guard, which is of course the hit point variation of the Ironfoot warriors. And then over here we have some Mithril Guard, the Mithril Guard, where the general is at. No, it isn't actually, that's just an officer. Interesting. And then we have some Ironfoot Spearmen, some Khazad Warriors. Again, they're pretty much the same thing as Ironfoot Warriors, only I think they look a little bit cooler. I like the cloaks, I like the chainmail. Then we have some Blacklock Engineers, of course. These guys are a little bit underwhelming, to be honest with you. They don't really do anything that regular crossbows don't, and they have much less ammunition and they're much more expensive. But they are also much better in melee because they have hit points and they pull out their axes, so we'll see how they do. Sons of Durin, these guys are very, very strong. They do a lot of damage. That's the difference between them and something like the Mithril Guard. They will do a considerable amount more damage than they will, which means they tend to kill their way out of situations rather than just try and outlast the enemy. And then we have here, there's King Dane in a unit of Dwarven Noblemen. And still we're going in with the Dwarves. We have Ironfoot Pikemen, Ironfoot Spears, and there are the Ironfoot Warriors. So yeah, the Ironfoot Warriors are present, and also some crossbows. So the Dwarves are sort of spread out a little bit across the field. Of course, this is going to be a fairly long intro because all the armies are pretty large, and I do need to explain the rules. Finally, the final defender is WK, playing as the Free Peoples of Eriador. He's got some Cardland Royal Guard. Eriador not traditionally a faction which is particularly good at holding down a very defensive position, but with all their elites they should be able to manage it, and they should be able to augment with their strengths their allies' armies. The Cardland Royal Guard, of course, are technically spearmen, I believe, with hit points. They're not quite as impressive as other hit point spearmen, but they will still hold the line against lower tier orcs very easily. Here's another unit of Cardland Royal Guard. Of course, the Forest Shell Gatekeepers are pretty much a must for Eriador in every situation, so here they are. And in the background here we can see 2 units of Forest Shell Captains. This is essentially equivalent to having something like 2 units of Haven Guard. They're very, very powerful, particularly against lower tier units like lightly armoured orcs. They'll do less good against very high tier shock troops, if we can ever get there, of course. And then of course out here we have his sort of bread and butter units, the Forest Shell Heavy Swords and the Forest Shell Heavy Spearmen. The Eriador, of course, have considerably less expertise in terms of their infantry than their allies, but the Forest Shell Heavy Swords are still pretty good in this sort of numbers. He's also got Arnor Pikemen as opposed to the Cardland Warband for a bit more armour, and the Forest Shell Heavy Archers, and he's got a unit of Knights of Numinos over there, and a unit of Arnorian Bodyguard over here. I don't begrudge Eriador being given Arnor's Cav in this situation, because while Eriador's Cav, as I showed in the last battle, can be useful with its speed, in this sort of situation it's much more important to have your protection and your armour, otherwise you'll just get focused down by the massive amounts of orcs that you're going to have to fight. Also over here we have some Forest Shell Heavy Archers as well. And then out here we have, because you can actually go through these choke points here, but I'll talk about that more as the battle's going on. Forest Shell Heavy Swords, Arnor Pikemen, some battle ready Dunedain, and he does have some Black Wolds hidden around here somewhere as well. So without further ado, let's move on to the attacking armies, and first of all we start off with Tundra's Fox, who is once again playing in his comfortable faction as the Orcs of the Misty Mountains. He's got a lot of Goblin infantry here at the front in loose, just to sort of ward off any cav charges with these stakes. He's also got some heavy Goblin archers. His army, of course, we're not going to have as elite armies as the defenders, so don't expect too much in the way of elites. But we do have some Mountain Uruk archers over here, so we do have a skirmish force at least, which hopefully can be used to pepper down some of the outer defences before we really get into the meat and potatoes of the Woodland Realms army. I'm sorry, I've just completely blanked for a second there. regardless, we have some heavy goblin spears, some underground goblins mixed in with these heavy goblin halberds, so decent armor piercing core in the Misty Mountains force here, which should be decent against the dwarves, hopefully. More heavy goblin spears over here. Of course, they will still lose, but that armor piercing damage is going to be much better served going up against the dwarves and Eriador than it will be against the Wooden Realms. Some heavy goblin infantry on the other hand, a bit more survivable, decent armor for goblins, but of course they will still lose pretty handily in any melee fight. Also over here we can see there's some Black Uruk Warband. The Black Uruk Warband, of course, are probably slightly better than the heavy goblin infantry in terms of actually getting kills, but probably slightly worse in terms of taking arrow fire, which is going to be the most important thing here. Some snow trolls. These guys will also be pretty good at warding off cavalry, provided they don't get charged. Some mountain Uruk blades, which are again better than heavy goblin infantry. Slightly more elite Misty Mountains mainline units, and back here we have the Orc bodyguards, the only unit so far that's had hit points apart from the trolls. But also he has the most potent cavalry unit that we have been given as the attackers in this battle, and that is the Bolgs champions. So if you can get a charge off and get into sustained melee against one of the Arnorian cavalry units, for example, you're going to do pretty well for yourself as the Bolgs champions, provided you can get some reinforcements to them right away. And Tundra's Fox's army has no rules attributed to it; it can attack in its full force from the get-go. Meanwhile, over here we have Stewed Balrog, formerly known as Stewed Fungus, playing as one of the Mordor armies. We have a lot of Orc fodder in the front again, similar to their Goblin infantry, just being used as a buffer to make sure they can be charged by cavalry. And then over here we have some Uruk halberds just in behind, so that they can also be committed to deal with a frontal cavalry charge. They don't have a particularly good charge defense against cavalry, but in sustained melee, their anti-cavalry and anti-armor bonus will do very well against the Arnorian cav in particular. Got a lot of Moran on guard here in loose formation again. Spears and Orc maulers over there on the flank, and also we have some mountain trolls here in the middle. Similar setup here to the Misty Mountains in many ways. A lot of assorted infantry units on the lower end of the scale with some trolls in the middle, and then at the back here we've got some slightly more impressive units in the Uruks. And then he also has the Uruk bodyguard and one unit of Moran on heavy maulers. So if he can get these guys charged into the Eriador or the Mordor, not the Mordor ranks, the Dwarven ranks, they should do pretty well for themselves if they're backed up, but we'll see. Obviously, you know, it's about attrition for us at the moment. He's also got some Uruk archers just sort of off on their own over there, but they'll regroup with the main army again. He has got no rules either. He can join the Misty Mountains and attack this end of the settlement, essentially right from the get-go. Now we'll move on, I think, to the army that's way down here, and Froggy playing as the second Orcs of the Misty Mountains unit and the final Orcs of the Misty Mountains army. He has some Mountain Uruk blades, he has some heavy Goblin infantry. It's going to be pretty similar fare, I think. So he's got some Goblin infantry, heavy Goblin halberdiers, heavy Goblin infantry, more halberdiers, and again he's got some Mountain Uruk blades. He also has some Mountain Uruk pikes hidden in there as well, so hopefully we can get them into the cavalry, but we shall see. And we also have some Mountain Uruk archers. There's a bit of a skirmish force, but again, these guys, a single unit of Mountain Uruk archers doesn't stand a chance against the Woodland Realms up on that hill. And then back here we've got some slightly more elite units, some Orc bodyguards, a unit of Black Uruks of the mountains, some Mountain Trolls, and around here there are also at least one unit of Black Back Berserkers, possibly two, if I remember correctly. But yes, also he has no rules. He can attack basically through the Valley of Death straight away. And then move on to my army. So I'm playing as the Orcs of Gundabad. I've got a lot of Orc Marauders. I think I've got 5 or so units of Orc Marauders. I've got 1 unit of Wargs, of course. 1 unit of Warg Riders will be good to reinforce those Bolgs champions. Got 2 units of Orc Fellers, 2 units of Orc Halberdiers. And then back here we have finally some elite core action going on. We have Witch Realm Blackguard, which is where my general is, Trolls of Gundabad, 2 units of Guardians of Khan Doom, Witch Realm Hammer Guard, some Gundabad Guard, and 1 unit of Black Uruks of the Mountain. So this is, and 2 units of Scourge Raiders. So this is a genuinely dangerous part of my army, so, you know, the elves won't just be dealing, well, the elves and the dwarves and the men, it's like the last alliance, we'll have to deal with some elite forces at least, and my army is kind of split. We'll just go back there a moment. My Wargs can move right from the start to reinforce my allies to make sure they aren't completely mown down by the cavalry. And then after, I think, 5 minutes, my lower tier Marauders, Halberdiers, and my Orc Fellers can move to reinforce wherever they are needed. And then my elite units can move alongside this Mordor army, which is commanded by Master Blaster. He's got the most quality throughout his army, I think, the most consistent army anyway. He's got some Mordor Moran on bows, and 2 units of those at the front, and then he's got some Uruk halberds as well. Some standard Uruks, so there's no trash here really. It starts right with the Uruks at the front line. More Uruks there, some Moran on heavy maulers, good armor piercing there. Moran on Uruks, Orc Raiders, Moran on halberds. Then back here we have, getting into the elite units, we have the Sauron's Will, we have more Uruks, we have Olag High, we have Temple Inquisitors, We have Moran on Uruks again, Temple Guard, and he's got Orc Raiders and Heavy Maulers. So he has got one unit of trash, I guess, in the Orc Raiders, but you can see that he's also got the biggest in the way of a skirmish force that we have got to field with the Temple Guard and quite a few Moran on bows, but he's also got those Temple Inquisitors and a lot of decent infantry. And he can move, I believe it's 20 minutes after the battle starts. Essentially, it's when we start to struggle to get through the defensive positions. I think that's when he will start to move, and that will be also when my elite units start to move. So, without further ado, let us begin. This is likely to be fairly long. 40,000 frames is pretty substantial, but it's not overly ridiculous, and hopefully the lag won't be too bad either. The lag wasn't terrible when we were playing, honestly. It was slow, of course, but that's to be expected with so many orcs on the field. And as we can see, if we just move over here, the orcs, there will be a bit of a slowdown sometimes when we just zoom in on a lot. But there are the battles are spread out, so I'm hopeful that the lag won't be terrible this time. We can see that the Knights of Numenus getting menacingly closer to Stewed Balrog's army, and that's going to be a real problem for him. And also, if we look over here, we can see the Mountain Uruk archers marching forward, and we can also see the Hiri Bang. There's also that Woodland Realm cavalry force over here. So Froggy has probably got the most. He's got the most undesirable task. He's got to go through the Woodland Realms, potentially their cavalry as well, and he's already getting shot by archers. Although these are lower tier units, so it's not all bad. But even so, it's not terrific for him. And also, we can see over there that the cavalry forces from WK is taking quite an aggressive defensive stance. He's not retreating into the buildings by any means. He's going to fight out in the fields and try and take the fight to us, which against a lot of these lower tier units is not a bad idea at all, because they won't be able to offer too much resistance. It's only the elites which are really a problem. We can see the Bolgs champions cycling around here, trying to get close to the cavalry. That's definitely where they'll be best off. And also, he's going up here, so he could, obviously with the reinforcement armies, the only thing that I'm committing at the moment is my Warg Riders. He can't go into my sort of idle troops while they can't be committed. So clearly what he's trying to do around here is trying to go into the side of Froggy's army and break the back of his army pretty quickly, and this is going to be a real problem because he's also having to deal with the Woodland Realms, and if he has to deal with 2 units of very elite Arnorian cavalry as well, things are going to go very badly for him very quickly. But we shall see. These Knights of Numenus, of course. This is where WK's general is as well, the bodyguard unit. Both of these units are very, very strong indeed. And I'm just trying to save Froggy at this point. I know my Warg Riders won't win in a one-to-one engagement with Knights of Numenus, but I'm trying to slow down the cavalry's advance to his position. I did get a downhill charge though, and with the downhill charge I do actually get a few kills on the Knights of Numenus, which is good, and the sustained sort of anti-cavalry damage that they will do does mean that a few of these Knights of Numenus are going to drop, so that was a pretty nice charge. But ultimately, as soon as they stabilise, so I did manage to kill just over 10, well, yeah, just over 10 of them. But now, with a side charge from the bodyguards, and with the overall defensive values of the Knights of Numenus, even the anti-cavalry damage that these Warg Riders can do is not going to be sufficient to finish them off. However, fortunately, I do have reinforcements on the way from my allies. Stewed Balrog sent over his Mountain Trolls, and Tundra's Fox sent over his Bolgs Champion. So these Arnorian cavalry units are going to need to retreat, otherwise they're going to take prohibitive losses at this point, because the Knights of Numenus do need to keep some of their numbers intact so they get some nice juicy charges off later on. But yeah, they've taken some decent damage, so I was willing to, I've only got 8 Wargs left, but I was willing to sacrifice my Wargs. That was a good, considering I only wanted to stall the Arnorian cavalry and not do an overly big amount of damage to it. I'll take that trade. I basically cut a unit of Knights of Numenus in half with the help of my allies' trolls and my allies' Bolgs champions. Meanwhile, if we look over here, the melee fight is already engaged, and the Woodland Realms are actually a little bit thin on the ground at the front here. And unfortunately, the lag that this sort of choke point fight is going to induce is going to be quite sickening. But fortunately, this probably won't be going on for too much longer. We can see that really the only thing up here was the Hir and Ek and the Avari Elder Pikemen. And I don't blame Froggy for trying to push through with mass, to be honest with you. But this is, of course, meaning that the blob is almost too easy to shoot. But fortunately for the Woodland Realms, the dwarves are on the way over here, because the Woodland Realms, one of the few things they do have working against them is the fact that Elven mass is not huge, so they are susceptible to mass pushes like the one the Misty Mountains is attempting at the moment. The dwarves, however, are not, and that's what makes the dwarves such a reliable defender when you're outnumbered like this, like 3 to 5 armies, because they're so difficult to push through, especially something like Sons of the Fallen. You can see that the line is almost immediately stabilised by the addition of the Sons of the Fallen. Of course, that's not really a particularly nice fight to behold, because it is just a giant blob of goblins. So we'll go somewhere else on the battlefield, I think. And we can see here that the Mountain Trolls and the Bolgs Champions are still trying to chase down the Cavalrymen. And we can see over here that the Heavy Goblin Infantry from Froggy, they tried to sort of get into the rear of WK's defences, but unfortunately they were very easily dealt with by Forest Shell Captains and Arnorian Bodyguard. And unfortunately over here the Mountain Trolls turn their backs. Froggy's Mountain Trolls, this is. They do manage to get a counter charge off on the Bodyguard at the last minute though, so the Mountain Trolls will take some pretty significant losses to a cavalry charge. However, they will at least kill some bodyguards in return. Unfortunately, the Forest Shell Captains are also looming large over here, so things are dicey over here. There's a lot of elite Eriador units, which we don't want to sort of sacrifice our units to too easily. Oof. There's a lot of units on the field. Maybe I spoke too soon with the lag. You can see that these Mountain Trolls sort of carving through these Arnorian pikemen. However, the Black Wolds are nearby, and the Black Wolds will do very well against trolls like this. And you can see that the Knights of Anuman has managed to escape the clutches of the Wargs as well. I think my Wargs are all dead, actually. I think we did miss that. The Bolgs Champions, on the other hand, pushed through the Arnorian lines and are now back and safe behind the assault which is underway now. And we can see that the Orc Maulers from Stewed Balrog. Stewed Balrog is essentially going full in over here against Eriador's outer position. Well, you can see over there that Tundra's Fox is sort of taking on some of the choke points where the dwarves are occupying it. You know, not really a huge opportunity for getting through them on this front. There's also Dunedain Rangers, which I missed in the army composition there. But really over here, where Eriador is stretched quite thin, is going to be our best hope of sort of really carving into this settlement. There's a lot of elite units. The Black Wolds are going to do very well for themselves against something like Uruks. And even against Moranon units, they're going to do very well because they carve through armour. Really, skirmishers are what you want to do to deal with them, but we don't have very many skirmishers, unfortunately for us. The Bolgs Champions actually do manage to get into these Knights of Anumanas. Unfortunately, though, they are backed up by 2 units of Forest Shell Captains, so the Bolgs Champions do need to retreat from there pretty quickly, as they do. We also have some Snow Trolls coming in from Tundra's Fox, so this is where the majority of the action is at the moment. Oof. Crunchy lag. Not as bad as the last map though, which is kind of weird. Considering the amount of orcs that are on display here, the amount of armies, the amount of men clashing, you would have expected this map to be even laggier, but it really isn't. It's actually watchable. Believe me, if you think this is lag, you should see the what was it? It was the Minas Tirith one, wasn't it? Where I was forced to go into sort of half speed the whole match. The bodyguards going away. We can see actually the dwarves are flanking around and are going to attack Froggy's army from the side. So the Eriador cavalry was not really able to do that because of the presence of Misty Mountain skirmishers and the trolls. But the dwarven infantry, much more resilient to stuff like basic archers. If I can just turn the camera. And we can see that he hasn't skimped on this either. This flanking force is made up of guards of Khazad-dûm, and you just saw previously the Hammers of Gundabad. So these are 2, especially the guards of Khazad-dûm, a hyper elite unit. Hammers of Gundabad are being targeted by the Misty Mountain skirmishers, which is the right target. They are more vulnerable to that than the very tanky guards of Khazad-dûm are. And of course over here we can see the Black Uruks. The Black Uruks are armor piercing, but the guards of Khazad-dûm are so elite that they're just going to be able to push in and deal with them. So the Blackback Berserkers are going to be required, and I believe that's them in the background. Yes, it is. They're moving into position, and you can see that my army is also moving up on the minimap, and I'm moving up forward with my halberdiers to try and reinforce Froggy, because I did realise that Froggy, with the situation he was in, if his army were to break, all of that Woodland Realms cavalry would have free reign to come and charge out and essentially just wrap us up completely and cycle charge our army to death while the dwarves and Eriador held us on the main front. So despite the fact that I wasn't really too keen on sending most of my units over here because I knew they would just be shot by the Woodland Realms up on that cliff there, you can just about see them, I figured I kind of had to. At least my trash. My elite units I wouldn't send anywhere near here because of course the Woodland Realms, that's like candy to them. Meanwhile, if we look over here we can see the Hammers of Gundabad and the Guards of Khazad-dûm dealing with all of these units. Heavy Goblin Halberdiers, they are a very depleted unit. They are armor piercing, but it's not going to matter. They are being targeted by the Woodland Realms skirmishers. That's going to be very bad for them. But here are the Blackback Berserkers, and the Blackback Berserkers are monsters in melee, and they will turn this fight right around. The Guards of Khazad-dûm will lose to the Blackback Berserkers. The Guards of Khazad-dûm are much, well, they're focused around being anti-armor with their axes. Blackback Berserkers have very little armor. and the Blackback Berserkers tear through heavily armoured units like this. The Hammers of Gundabad will be charging into the sides of these Blackback Berserkers though, and they did get a charge off, which means some of those unit models did drop. Now unfortunately I did see WK's cavalry did come back, but I was able to fortunately block Froggy's army with my Orc Halberdiers. The Orc Halberdiers of course got cut in half by a single charge from very depleted cavalry units, but it's enough. This is, as long as the Blackback Berserkers are free to go about their work, it's worth losing my Orc Halberdiers over. Very low tier Halberdiers. Of course these guys are coming back I think for another charge, or are they just gonna leave? Now I've got my Halberdier line set up and WK doesn't want any of that, which is very wise. WK is aggressive but not to the point of recklessness. And we have these Bolgs champions in here with these Uruks dealing with these bodyguards. The WK's general is still alive though, so the Menferior, but you can see that ultimately the very thin defense is starting to break over here. So yeah, the Orcs and the Uruks starting to pour in, but WK does have the positions he can fall back to. Of course he has this escape route over here which he is now taking, so these Forest Shell captains are going to retreat with the Arnor pikemen and with the Forest Shell heavy swords. A few of them are being left behind as a rearguard action, but that is to be expected. And if we go into the settlement over here, we can see that you can go through a lot of these buildings. You can go through. So this one sort of little alcove area, he's going to obviously clog it up with pikes so the Orcs can't go through here. And there goes Ariador's general, killed by the Bolgs champions. But you can also see that this choke point is being held by the dwarves, and it is largely the Ironfoot spears and the Erebor infantry, but also very significantly the dwarves also committed a very elite unit over here. So I do like how the dwarven player wasn't being overly conservative with his men, because he sent forward his Sons of Durin, and the Sons of Durin have been getting a lot of kills. Admittedly, against something like Underground Goblins, it's not the most impressive feat, and Uruks are exactly the sort of unit the Sons of Durin love to fight, but they are capable of getting tons and tons of kills. In terms of infantry, they are one of the sort of infantry units that could potentially get extremely high kills most games. You know, very similar to something like Temple Inquisitors. They are very effective, but of course they do have their limitations. But you can see that Ariador and the dwarves are sort of regrouped within the shelter of these buildings. You can also go into this building over here. As you can see, the dwarven noblemen are taking shelter over here. But we shall see how this goes, and we can actually see the Axemen of Erebor taking on what's left of these Mountain Uruk archers. Again, this is another situation where the dwarves could charge out here and sort of surround Froggy and now my trash army's position. So we want to pin them into position, and Froggy sent forward his archers. They're out of ammunition. I'm also going to engage the front line with my Orc Halberdiers, because if I don't, they're just going to be shot. So I might as well engage them in melee so they can do at least some damage. And then back over here, the frame rate is starting to stabilise quite nicely now. You can see the Blackback Berserkers. They're also now being backed up by a unit of my Orc Fellas. That's more armour piercing. These Guards of Khazad-dûm, there are only 11 of them remaining, and the Hammers of Gundabad, I believe, are completely destroyed. Actually no, there are still a couple of them. There's 4 of them, but they don't have the staying power that a lot of the other high tier dwarven units do have. And that's why, considering they have hit points, they're cheaper than their peers. But it's just, my Orc Marauders are arriving basically just as Froggy's army has been completely stopped. So you can see I sent forward a unit of Orc Fellas to make sure that they couldn't just counter-attack us, but these Avari Elder Pikemen and these Sons of the Fallen are just going to chew through my Orc Fellas. Fortunately, however, I do have a large force of Marauders on the way. The Marauders are AP, that's not going to help me at all against the Woodland Realms units, but against the Dwarven units on hand, they're not going to do too badly. So I've got a really full complement of Orc Marauders, and Froggy still has his Orc Bodyguard, so we'll see how well he can do. And over here, this fight is underway, very much so. I'm glad the frame rate has stabilised somewhat. Over here, it's still a little choppy. But we can see over here that the Moran Guard and the Uruks are trying to push into this little alcove. But with the position that these Arnor pikemen and these battle-ready Dunedain have in these cramped spaces, the Orcs are not really going to be able to get through here too easily. The last alliance holds the line. Yes, they are eager. They are winded, though. These pikemen have been fighting for quite some time already. Yes, I do like the Arnor pikemen. One of the most efficient units in the current patch, I think. I've had great success with them. You can see that these Sons of Durin still have 84 men left in the unit, and they're basically holding the line out here all by themselves. They do have some support from these Erebor infantrymen, although the Erebor infantry are kind of facing the wrong way, and they are very vulnerable to being charged. If these Sons of Durin weren't here, the Erebor infantry would be surrounded. The Sons of Durin just carving their way through Stewed Balrog's main line. The Uruks don't really stand much of a chance. Some armour piercing is really needed to deal with them, but Orc Fodder, the Uruk Halberds, if they got into formation, into Spear Wall, would do much better than these Uruks, and the Orc Fodder, of course, is just there to basically die. We also have some Goblin infantry being moved up by Tundra's Fox. They're just sort of throwing everything they can at this single unit of Sons of Durin, hoping they can break through. Because if they do, the only other way they can get through is through this alcove. Back there we do have a unit of Ironfoot Guard. The Ironfoot Guard are significantly less scary than the other units on offer, though, the Sons of Durin and the Erebor infantry. WK has sent forward a unit of Arnor pikemen to reinforce the Sons of Durin, which is something Stewed Balrog really didn't want to see, I'm sure. We can see that there are actually 2 avenues of attack over here, but again, we had to really focus down because they were able to put in an elite force, and if we sort of attack piecemeal on every choke point with our armies, we would get nowhere. Well, at least that's what I assume they were thinking over here anyway. We only have 2 choke points available to us. Of course, I could have sent my force to help Stewed Balrog, but if I did, Froggy's army would have completely collapsed under the weight of the Dwarven and Elven defence, and then we would have potentially had Elven cavalry in our back ranks. So my hand was forced, but my elites will have a little bit more free reign. These Orc Halberdiers don't stand too much of a chance against Ironfoot Halberdiers and Axemen of Erebor, but they are at least occupying the front line, which is all I need them to do. Then if we look over here at this front line, once again we have, well, this tree is in the way, but once again we have a frame rate killing, well, it's not bad I suppose. These Orc Bodyguards really are the only elite unit we have on the front line at this point. But their hit points do mean that they will last in melee quite a long time, and they are also in amongst the safety of the hit point sponge of my Orc Marauders. But unfortunately this is the moment where Brainy Smurf decides that the catapult will be engaged, and he begins to fire down onto my position, which is very bad for me. The Orc Marauders are likely to rout if they take too many hits like that, but I think that we have actually missed a couple of shots, because he did actually get some friendly fire on the Mithril Guard, which to be honest with you makes my assault completely worth it. Trading 3 units of Orc Marauders for 1 unit of Mithril Guard is something that at this point we will absolutely take. Although the Catapult and the Archers, of course, just dealing tremendous amounts of damage. The Archers are mainly going for the Orc Bodyguards, I think. Unfortunately, there is another unit of Hiri Dirith being committed forward to hold this line. And at this point it's really just, it's kind of a stalemate over here, because I can commit forward more men. I'm committing forward a unit of depleted Orc Fellas, and I think I do have more Orc Marauders. Yes, I do have more Orc Marauders in reserve, so I can essentially keep throwing forward fodder to the point where they won't be able to counter-attack out of here, which does mean that that cavalry will stay in here and not attack our back ranks, which is all I really wanted. You can see up here, you can also see that my elites are sort of on the hill over there, but I didn't want to commit them forward because of course they would just be targeted immediately by the Elven Archers. Let's go back over to here though, because the other 2 lines there's not going to be a lot of movement, but over here this is where we are pinning our hopes essentially. You can see that the Orcs over here in this building have essentially been fought to a standstill. You know what? I'm going to get a screenshot. An interior fight. Oh, there goes, I believe that is Froggy's general, killed by the Hiri Bang in melee. But yeah, the Arnor Pikemen, the Foreshell the addition of the Foreshell captains over here was a little armor rack, was always going to kill these Uruks off. That's a weapon rack, not an armor rack, or a torture rack even. That would look like a pizza cutter. You can see over here though that finally the Sons of Durin they aren't dead, there are still 37 of them, and they are having to deal with Sauron's Will now. Sauron's Will, much more like it going up against Sons of Durin because they are armor piercing. So we're finally doing some decent damage to them, but they have been forced out of the way essentially, which does mean we can finally start assaulting this choke point over here. These Foreshell Heavy Archers are in the way. The Dwarven Noblemen, which is the general's unit for the Dwarves, are trying to get away, and that's right because these Olag High are in the way, so they do need to sort of get their shift on. You can see that Master Blaster's forces, those Sauron's Will, were Master Blasters. His army has essentially moved forward and he is now able to reinforce, so obviously Master Blaster and my elite corps are now free to be used where and when they can. But now that Master Blast has arrived, we could start pressurising these choke points as well. Because over here they're starting to look a little bit thin on the ground. Pikemen, Ironfoot Warriors, with decent numbers, you could force your way through that. You can see there are actually quite a lot of quite a lot of crispy corpses over there. Is that... So it looks like fire arrows were used, maybe? But yes, Tundra's Fox did have a skirmish force of sorts. So you can see now that these two choke points are sort of fighting right next to each other. This house is where Eriador and the dwarves are sort of making their stand. And of course, Eriador's infantry does mean that eventually they will probably be the first ones to cave on one of these fronts. We shall see. You can see that is a lot of Uruks. There are actually some Ironfoot spears still out there, fighting back to back, 50 of them. It's hard to tell because they actually do kind of blend into the orcs now that there are so many orcs up on the front lines. But they are thoroughly outnumbered and they will be surrounded and crushed. But the Dwarven and WK's aggressive defence, if I can get my words out, I think yielded some pretty good results. Stewed Balrog's army got torn up by some of those elite units. And the sort of the Misty Mountains forces, kind of the same sort of story, although the Misty Mountains do have more in reserve, because they of course do have a few more units they can use later on, potentially. But we shall see. We also have some Blacklock engineers moving forward here. I think they're maybe going to try and finish off these trolls, although it doesn't look like they need help. There's only one Olag High left. You can see over here there are some the Uruk bodyguard of Stewed Balrog moving away. That is his general's unit. It's a it's got hit points, so it's a genuinely useful unit. There's one Foreshell captain running around out here. What a hero! Look at this guy trying to retreat. You can actually see over here that I did send forward a unit of Orc Marauders because I did figure that maybe if we can get in some armor piercing into this front over here, we could try and force our way through, but it's not really looking like that's altogether likely. WK also sent forward some Dunedain Rangers just to hold this line, to shore it up a little bit. And yeah, these Orc Marauders, they don't really stand too much of a chance against elite units. 217 of them remaining, and over here you can see there's very little movement on this flank. The Mountain Uruk archers still firing away. I'm surprised they haven't been skirmished down by the Woodland Realms, to be honest with you. The fact that this unit of archers is still going strong is a testament to how well they've done, but I think they are getting shot now by... Well, actually, no, those Dunedain Rangers are out of ammunition. These Foreshell Heavy Archers are not, however. But yeah, our front line over here is looking pretty thin on the ground, to be honest with you. We do desperately need them to force their way into the settlement over on this front, to be honest with you. Because we only have 2 armies over there, and we have to deal with the Woodland Realm skirmish position, whereas over here they really only have to deal with the Dwarven infantry, which is a static variable most of the time. You can see that the Saurons will, fresh after confronting the Sons of Durin and finally finishing them off, are now pushing into this choke point. And now it's looking pretty grim for Eriador over here. They're starting to get buckled a little bit. The Foreshell Heavy Archers and the Arnor Pikemen doing their best to hold, but provided that the Mordor players continue to just push through with mass, they should be good here. The Ironfoot Guard will stabilise that somewhat now that the Dwarven player has noticed it. But even so, the Ironfoot Guard are not AP. They are a thoroughly defensive entity. So they are vulnerable to being attritioned down as well, although a bit of haste is required before my and Froggy's armies are completely destroyed. There are Dwarven noblemen over here. I also heard the twang of the Blacklock engineers firing their missiles. I assume they're going for an elite unit. Possibly the Saurons will, but we shall see. And over here, the Orcs have essentially been forced out of the settlement once again. Not surprising though when Uruk archers are the only thing that's really attacking this area anymore. The Uruk bodyguard is still alive. Heavy Goblin infantry. There's a lot of forces still over here. And you can see now that Master Blaster is sending forward more of his men, more of his Uruks. The Temple Guard are in position and are firing. On what I'm not quite sure. Maybe the Blacklocks, but the Blacklocks not really worth going after. They have such low ammunition. Really, as an infantry unit, they're more deadly, to be honest with you, at this point. These Uruk halberds getting in, and suddenly this defensive position over here is looking a little bit thin on the ground, to the point where WK has to send in a slightly depleted unit of Foreshell Heavy Swords to help out. So these are Khazad Warriors, Ironfoot Spears. None of these units over here have hit points, which is how you can tell that they're going to be much more vulnerable to an attrition-based type battle. There's a lot of Uruk halberds over here, a lot of standard Uruks as well. So hopefully they will do very well for themselves. And hopefully we can finally sort of try and get into the settlement in some capacity. But we shall see. Meanwhile over here we can also see that these Morannon halberds sort of menacing this position over here. These Ironfoot pikes, they're sort of ready, willing and able to hold back the tide, because Tundra's Fox is also sending over some forces over here as well. So now that Master Blaster's army has arrived, we can finally put pressure on all of these flanks, and have success, because previously it would have just been putting pressure on all these flanks with like 25% of an army that was trash, which not great. We can see, however, now with stuff like Temple Inquisitors able to back up Uruks, fronts like this are going to be very successful for us. Whether it will be too late or not, we shall see. Victory will be ours, apparently. And we can see on the percentages of kills, we've lost 63% of our army, they've lost 54%, which is a pretty low gap at this point for the defenders. But of course they do have those elites waiting in the wings for us. We'll see how that goes. Meanwhile, if we look over here, I have actually sent forward some of my Witch Realm Scourge Raiders at this point. I decided that I needed to be a bit more proactive as well, and I did notice actually that this area, my Orc Marauders did a pretty good job at whittling down some of these Dwarven defensive units. So I decided to send forward my Scourge Raiders in an effort to force my way through here. And also this means that they are covered by the building, which means my Scourge Raiders won't be skirmished down, which is nice. Meanwhile, what's going on over here? We can actually see the Dunedain Rangers running around. And actually, I did send forward my Black Uruks of the mountains, and Tundra's Fox has got a unit of Heavy Goblin Infantry over here now, and some Mountain Uruk Blades. My Orc, well, actually that's Stewed Bower Orc has sent forward some Orc Fodder, so this front is suddenly a bit of a mismatch of our armies. But you can see that my Black Uruks are more elite, but against the Woodland Realms it's really not the best place for them, but I needed to send forward something, because again this front was falling, and we need to just keep them in place a little longer. Because again, as soon as we start breaking through the choke points, that's when the Elven Cav is going to be committed over there, rather than over here. So if we can just hold here a little longer, things should go pretty well for us. And we can see that these Sons of the Fallen, being charged by my Black Uruks, being pinned in position by that fodder and those Heavy Goblin Infantry. There's a lot of dead bodies over there, Elven, Dwarven and Orc alike, and Goblin. I never understood what the difference between Goblins and Orcs was in Lord of the Rings though. It's not really... I mean, they're like cave orcs, right? I don't know. Regardless, you can see these Ironfoot Halberdiers going to struggle. And we can actually see over here that the Wargs managed to get in behind the lines. And they're going to go for these Forest Shell Heavy Swordsmen. Oh, bit of lag here, as Mordor has sort of engaged this front line, the Ironfoot Pikes. Defences are looking a little bit thin on the ground, and this is where our numbers come into it. They're not able to defend every choke point as heavily as they've been defending the choke points up to now. We can actually see over here these Bolgs Champions, and we can see over here there's Forest Shell Gatekeepers. So let's go over here, shall we? The Forest Shell Gatekeepers cranking their crossbows up. These Bolgs Champions, I mean, this is not really the best target for them to go after, because Forest Shell Gatekeepers have pikes, and they are able to get that volley off, which is going to be just lethal. Scything down that unit of Bolgs Champions by about 2/3 in one volley, and then when they stay in melee with them, the pikes, well, or the billhooks I guess, of the Forest Shell Gatekeepers are going to mean that that unit of Bolgs Champions essentially could have been used to recharge the infantry units over here. Instead it went for the Gatekeepers and it paid the ultimate price, and now there are too few of them to go toe to toe with the Elder Kingsguard and the Elder Pathfinders, so they are gone. We've basically lost our one remaining cavalry unit, which is going to be poorer for us. It's going to be bad for us, essentially. You can see over here that there are the Orc bodyguards. Oh, Froggy's general is still alive. Well, his unit anyway. Misty Mountains, Orc, Heavy Goblin Infantry, Black Uruks. Mountain Uruk Blades as well. Let's have a look at this choke point over here, shall we? We can see that more reinforcements were sent over here. A unit of Forest Shell Heavy Archers attempting to hold the line just a little bit longer, because at this point we did notice that the enemy was sort of forming up their position on the hill. So we got the sense that we were going to have to deal with the cavalry in the open field beyond the settlement, and then we would have to assault the hill with whatever we had left. And we can actually see over here that the Bolgs Champions are going to get a side charge into these Forest Shell Heavy Archers. Excuse me. And they are going to get some kills for their trouble. Interestingly enough though, the Elder Kingsguard, if they stay in melee over here, they won't do very well against the high attack Witch Realm Scourge Raiders. They need to get their charge off if they're going to be successful there at all. You can see there's Thranduil. He's sort of spazzing out, he's right there. But yes, you can also see that there are some snow trolls in the background, menacingly standing there from Tundra's Fox. But over here, that charge did actually mean that I do have a bit of a gap to take advantage of if I can get more units forward. My Scourge Raiders have done very well for themselves. I'm very impressed with my Scourge Raiders. Again, provided you can get them into melee without them being shot by arrows, they are very efficient. One of those little things that Gundabad has available to them. You can see that this choke point over here is still holding strong. This area over here, starting to look a little bit thin on the ground though. The Blacklock Engineers and a very depleted force of Eriador is trying to hold back all of these Morannon Uruks, which they aren't going to be able to do in the end. There was also some Ironfoot Guard, but finally, after a very costly push, we're going to have some success over here. There goes a general. I believe, based on the positioning of that, that was Stewed Balrog's general, his Uruk bodyguard, trying to force their way through the building just to my right. Because if we see in there, there are some battle-ready Dunedain still alive and some Dunedain Rangers. And yeah, it's the Uruk bodyguard. So yeah, Stewed Balrog and Froggy, they certainly had the worst armies, I think, and the worst jobs to deal with. So it's not surprising that their generals went first. See those Snow Trolls, Morannon Uruks. Ah, yes, of course. I nearly missed this, but you can see that the gap that those Bolg's champions did manage to create, I'm forcing through my Trolls of Gundabad. So we are now finally sort of running around within the settlement. We're going to be able to get some rear charges off on the enemy as they try and desperately pull back. And we can actually see there's also some Snow Trolls forcing their way through here, which is what I like to see. And in the background over there, there are some Hiri Bang that tried to reinforce the line, but it was too late to stop my Trolls of Gundabad getting through this line. And I'm going to... Also, the Snow Trolls managed to force their way through the building here, and we're going to sandwich these Dunedain Rangers, get a lot of kills on them. It's important to just get as many kills as we possibly can, try and really hammer home our numbers advantage at this point, because we're going to really need it against those Woodland Realms elite units that are on top of that hill. And also, whatever the Dwarves and Eriador can add to that is just going to be gravy. So what are we going to have here? The Trolls of Gundabad and the Snow Trolls moving forward as one. We do need to be careful of the Cavalry, of course, because the Cavalry can really just destroy a Troll unit off the charge, particularly a very elite one like the Elder Kingsguard. And I'm just going to charge into these Ironfoot Warriors, just try and speed up our entry into these settlements, or these choke points I should say. And we are essentially at the halfway point now, so the halfway point essentially marks the end of the settlement battle to a large extent. And now we move on to what is essentially a open plain battle with the Cavalry. Although we are just sort of trying to finish off these choke points over here, try and do as much damage as we possibly can. And over here you can see that I'm going to commit my Trolls of Gundabad over here to the Ironfoot Pikes to try and make it so that Mordor and the Misty Mountains up here can also break through. And the Snow Trolls in the background there are continuing to chase down those Dunedain Rangers, really doing a lot of damage to their numbers. And this pike line was already looking pretty thin, so the addition of my Trolls over here should really be the final nail in this choke point's coffin. There's also some Mountain Orc Berserkers coming forward there as well. One player admitted defeat. I believe that was Froggy. I believe his army was completely destroyed at this point. But again, he definitely had the worst job. Only 35 Ironfoot pikemen remaining, and I think that's the only thing holding this line at this point. You can also see some archers that are out of ammunition in melee. My heavily armoured Trolls. There's also Stewed Balrog's Uruk bodyguard moving across over here. The Snow Trolls in the background, but as you can see, bad tidings on the horizon because the Elder Kingsguard are coming in. And Trolls are kind of like, you can think of them basically like Axemen when dealing with Cavalry. They're good in sustained melee against Cavalry, but if they get charged, this is what happens. So there were 15, 13, 11, 10, 9, 7. Yep. Their unit was essentially cut in half by that. Alas, my poor Trolls. They do still have somewhat of a unit remaining, so they can still at least support this choke point with their muscle. But yeah, that's the price you pay. The Trolls are only good against Cavalry if you can get them into sustained melee, or if you can charge them while the Cavalry is stationary. If the Cavalry charges into you, even with a counter charge, your Trolls are going to largely die. But of course you do want to counter charge if possible, because it does mean that you're going to inflict some of your own charge damage onto the Cavalry. Meanwhile over here you can see that my Guardians of Kharndoom filtering into this choke point where we have had quite a bit of success. The Goblin Infantry here, the Witch Realm Scourge Raid is doing a lot of heavy lifting for me. Guardians of Kharndoom pushing forward. Unfortunately over here our forces are essentially breaking. The only thing we have left is a unit of 127 Mountain Uruk Blades from Tundra's Fox. And yeah, this choke point near the Woodland Realm skirmish position was always going to be very difficult to break down, and they held it very, very well. But they did commit quite a few men. You can see there are a lot of dead elves over here, so potentially this could also work in our favour. It just depends on how efficient each side has been, because most of what we've sent over there is trash. The only units that have been good are the Blackback Berserkers and the Black Uruks of the mountains. So the cavalry is now going to be our nemesis. Fortunately for us, however, the Elder Pathfinders are taking a lot of skirmish fire, and these guys are the vulnerable ones. The Elder Kingsguard not so much, but the Elder Pathfinders certainly. You can actually see I've still got one troll remaining. This troll of Gundabad leading the heavy goblin spears into battle. And he's trying his best. Oof. Go on, troll. You can do it. Use your spiky mace, your morning star. Again, I think that my trolls got charged again by the Pathfinders, and that's why 6 of them died very quickly. 'Tis very unfortunate for me indeed. But you can actually see that my forces are sort of starting to get in and around, so we're going to start to support those Mountain Uruk blades. These Elder Pathfinders, meanwhile, taking some attritional casualties. The Elder Kingsguard pulling back. I actually wouldn't recommend pulling back. The Elder Kingsguard could really do a number on my forces that were moving in here, and I was fearing that. But I figured that I had to do something. This troll, meanwhile, letting out his death cry and completely sideswiping that one Elder Pathfinder. What a hero. Look at this brave soul. Trolls not quite the juggernauts they used to be. As he dies. Obviously in vanilla they were exceptionally strong, but nowadays they are... I think trolls are balanced how cavalry should be balanced, to be honest with you. They have a purpose, and they should stick to that purpose, otherwise they get slaughtered. These Ironfoot halberds being attacked from both angles, from my Witchrealm Scourge Raiders. Meanwhile over here, my Guardians of Khan Doom attacking these Hiri Lang and Hiri Bang from the back, and now also from the front. I'm sending forward my other unit of Guardians of Khan Doom to really try and finish off this defensive position once and for all. Meanwhile, I think now is the time. We can see, yes, it is perfect timing, I think. Or is it? No, it isn't. Regardless, as I'm sure that you can, I've given it away really, but there is a pathway up here, which means that the defenders can sort of fall back even further if they wish. But perhaps more significantly, there is a pathway here. We didn't know this at the start of the battle, and I do think that there should be, going forward, there should be a rule that the attackers cannot simply just use this pathway to go up here, because otherwise the Misty Mountains army that started with Froggy would be able to just get up here, and the Woodland Realm skirmish line would be in danger from the start. And in order for the defenders to stand a chance, they do need that skirmish line. Oof. Gundabad Guard are also here. I'm trying to sort of make it so that if the cavalry comes over here, I've got my Gundabad Guard on station. Spearmen really are anti-cavalry in name only. They're still garbage at dealing with cavalry most of the time, but I thought they are the best unit I have for dealing with that sort of thing. Mountain Uruk blades. These Ironfoot halberdiers being surrounded now on all fronts. It's just about us now trying to clean up all of the resistance in the settlement. And I should mention at this point that Master Blaster went AFK during this battle. He does come back, but for the time being, the one with the healthiest army was not advancing with the rest of us. So that was... definitely didn't appreciate that. If you don't have the ability to sort of play a game from start to finish, just don't bother starting it. So here we have the Mountain Uruk Archers. Again, I'm amazed that this unit is still alive. As you know, this is not Froggy's, this is Tundra's Fox's Archers. Yes, of course, Froggy's army died some time ago. But we shall see how this goes now. This is really the epicenter of the fighting now. But we have managed to finally deal with this Alban choke point. And the Guardians of Khan Doom victorious, but they are taking catapult and archer fire. So the unrelenting skirmish power of the Woodland Realms just doesn't let up, and the attrition that my army's taken has been enormous. So even my elites are now subject to it. And we need the Guardians of Khan Doom, really. So where is the cavalry? Ah, here we are. The cavalry did actually fall back. Interestingly enough, if they didn't actually discover this hidden path, this was definitely the wrong thing to do with the cavalry. Bringing it back to the last stand and putting it inside a new box is the last thing you want to do with it, because you're basically taking away all of its strengths. You want to get your charge bonuses off, and you want to keep it running around, and you want to really do some harassing damage to the enemy. But you can see that WK found the pathway, and his battle ready Dunedain, what's left of his Foreshell captains and his Foreshell gatekeepers are going to go up and around here. And I believe that the cavalry does go up and around here as well. So Fortunately, the cavalry was not wasted. You can see the Witch Realm Hammer Guard and the Witch Realm Blackguard. I got them into loose because I think they were being shot over the hill by the Hin E Dower. The catapult is actually just getting shots into the cliff, which is exactly the sort of thing we want to see at this point. You can see that the Witch Realm Scourge Raiders are on the way forward, along with the Orc Marauders and the Guardians of Khan Doom. And then some Mountain Orc Berserkers as well. There's a single unit of Arnor Pikemen just sort of holding down this corner. I think what he wanted us to do was to take the bait and to attack this one unit of Arnor Pikemen. And then there would have been some skirmish fire coming our way, I'm sure. But it doesn't look like we're going to do that. We're just sort of getting our army into position because we did know that Master Blaster was AFK. We did know he was coming back though. And that was the key. We really needed his numbers to really push forward, otherwise we wouldn't stand a chance. I mean, my army is so tattered, and Tundra's Fox's army is really looking bad. And I think Stu Balrog, the only thing he has left is like units of like that unit of 10 halberdiers. I think he's still got his general's bodyguards somewhere, but that's like on 20 men as well. So he's basically not got an army left at all. You can see that, yeah, there goes the cavalry. Well, what's going on back here? Oh yes, it's routing Orc fellas. They've been routing around in circles for ages. You can see these Witch Realm units. My ace in the hole, the Witch Realm Blackguard. They are, I think, the only example of a sort of long sword and shield unit in the game which is armor piercing. It's the one thing they have over the Temple Inquisitors, interestingly enough. The Temple Inquisitors are not armor piercing, but the Temple Inquisitors have got enormous melee skill and an enormous base attack, which is what more than makes up for it. And I also have this Gundabad Guard here, so that's another elite unit. But again, they won't do a ton of damage. I'm really using these guys as... I had already sort of committed these guys to hunting down the cavalry if at all possible, because it's really the only unit I have which is going to be even close to capable of doing that without compromising myself from other fronts. I mean, the Witch Realm units could do it, but I really don't want to use them on the cavalry because they'll get charged and they'll lose half their unit in a single charge. So we really need my Witch Realm units to be dealing with some of those Woodland Realms elite units which are going to be up here. Stuff like the Elder Royal Guard and the Elder Royal Council. The Elder Royal Council up until this point have not used a single arrow of their ammunition. So this is going to be a real problem for us moving forward, and of course they are extremely potent in melee. They are better at range than the Elder Royal Nobles, but slightly worse in combat. I think that's what it is. But again, the differences there are kind of negligible. We have Ironfoot crossbows moving up onto this ridge. These Elder Pathfinders moving forth. And I think the Witch Realm units were the ones I didn't commit, but all of my other units I committed to hunting down the cavalry. Otherwise, it was bad news bears for me. See, there's the Elder Kingsguard, 25 of them remaining, and 12 Elder Pathfinders. That's a very potent cavalry force indeed. You can see those Foreshell Gatekeepers in the trees with the Foreshell Captains. Yes, so here we are. This is essentially the final phase of the battle. Well, at least we're leading into the final phase. The assault onto this hilltop position over here, past the encampment. There are a few areas of the map which didn't get used. I'm pretty sure that no, that's an impassable bit of terrain. But there is an area up there that you can potentially use a little bit. You can sort of retreat back in. You can't go all the way up, but you can at least sort of hide in this encampment over here. And there is another such pathway over here. This I think would be a very good map to use in a free-for-all, interestingly enough. Because you could also play King of the Hill on this map with that one hill. It's got 2 routes up, but obviously a free-for-all, if someone camped on the hill, it would be a case of ganging up on them immediately. But yeah, there's a lot of varied terrain, and I do like this map. Maps with varying terrain are always good. There's the Elder Kingsguard. But yeah, there's a bit of a lull in the action at the moment. As you can see, I've sort of set up my defensive position, my Gundabad Guard, just sort of in their shield wall amongst the corpses, preventing us from being rear charged. My Witch Realm units in particular could not afford a rear charge at this point. The Gundabad Guard, of course, multiple hit point spearmen. When in shield wall, they should at least prevent the cavalry from just carving through their ranks. And then when the cavalry is stopped dead, I was thinking that I could maybe charge my Witch Realm units in, if they chose to charge the Gundabad Guard, of course. But interestingly enough, Brainy Smurf didn't do this. Now, this was something that we were screaming at him not to do in the chat. Unfortunately, he wasn't. I don't think he had voice chat on, but he decided to charge the player that was AFK. Now, he did say that he was unaware of this, so He only does one charge, but even so, we'll see how significant one charge can be from a unit of Elder Kingsguard. So what have we got here? We've got Moran on Uruks, so the upgraded version of the Uruks. First going to be charged by the Elder Pathfinders, then going to be charged by the Elder Kingsguard. So this was not really great to see, because of course the player was AFK. We did tell him not to, but I don't know, I think there was a bit of willful ignorance until the charge had actually gone off before he decided to pull out. Maybe I'm just being unfair, but even so, it's when people are saying that you shouldn't, I mean, it's kind of his fault for going AFK, but even so, in the spirit of fair play, you shouldn't charge a player that's AFK like that. And as you can see, that Moran on Uruk unit taking some decent losses, not huge. Interestingly enough, if he went through, he would have actually hit the stakes, which would have been glorious karma, but unfortunately he didn't. Then we have the Uruks and Temple Guard over here. So fortunately he didn't charge something like Temple Inquisitors. So he has gone back now to sort of trying to deal with my forces, which I'm grateful for. Mountain Orc Berserkers. There is actually over here, I think, the Eriador Gatekeepers were trying to move in to attack my shield wall. Indeed, there they were, but they took damage from the Trolls, and they took damage from the Mountain Orc Berserkers, which is very bad for them. Meanwhile, the rest of my forces going to try and deal with these Elder Pathfinders. The Elder Pathfinders actually charging into the Mountain Orc Berserkers in loose formation, rather than my Guardians of Khan Doom, which were in solid formation. So actually not the best charge there. And we can see that the Elder Pathfinders actually took some significant losses from the axes of those Mountain Orc Berserkers on the retreat. But will it be enough? That is the question. And here we can see the Witch Realm Scourge Raiders. The Witch Realm Scourge Raiders I've got in loose formation as well. They're going to take a pretty nasty charge here. Oof. More of those Pathfinders going down though, but again the Kingsguard, the purple variant, so much more tanky, going to be so much more difficult to take out. And essentially, what I end up doing is chasing them around the battlefield as my like Gundavad Guard gets cycle charged over and over again. Very unfortunate for me. But again, at the moment, it's really the only thing that's happening. But we are approaching the final 10,000 frames of this battle, and it's still pretty even. I mean, if we look here, it's actually dead even, 82% to 82%. And in this situation, you would back the attackers to win, normally. However, with the position that the defenders hold, and with the fact they still have skirmish ammunition, and with their elites, I would say that the 82% is accurate, actually. I would say it's dead even at this point. I mean, we do still have the numbers to potentially affect something on this battle, and we can also go around, but it is going to take us a long time to go around. We can also see those Mountain Uruk Blades. So, yeah, it's going to be close, I think. We can see these Gundavad Guard. I'm trying to chase down the Elder Kingsguard so desperately. Also trying to deal with those Forest Captains. Although I think that those Forest Captains do actually go and hide in the woods and wait for the Mordor player to return. You can see those Guardians of Khan Doom. I'm just trying to form up, trying to deal with these Elder Kingsguard so desperately. 5 of them have died, I think mostly because of the Snow Trolls. I apologise if you can hear the dog, he's a noisy animal. And we can see over here that the Guardians of Khan Doom taking a charge, and they weren't in loose, so they get absolutely creamed. And they aren't really the unit that's going to do a lot of damage in return. They do get a single kill as they start pulling out, and actually there goes Thranduil. So the Scourge Raiders, I believe that was, that killed Thranduil. And again, these Gundavad Guard trying desperately to deal with this Elder Kingsguard. It's always so disheartening, and this is the power of Cavalry. I mean, this single unit of Elder Kingsguard, with cycle charging and good micro, can easily solo all of these elite units. I mean, the Gundavad Guard and Guardians of Khan Doom are elite heavy infantry units. They are expensive. And one unit of Elder Kingsguard is more than enough to just cycle charge them into oblivion. And I long for the next patch. Truly I do. A land where infantry is relevant again, and cavalry and high tier skirmishers are not the kingmakers all the time. But yes, Elder Kingsguard. I think that this is my least favourite cavalry unit in the game to deal with, to be honest, because at least the Knights of Anuminus and the Kalanador Knights are slow. The Elder Kingsguard are exceptionally fast, and they charge into my Orc Marauders that were in loose formation, and of course they cut through them like butter. Very bad for me. You can actually see over here that I'm actually going to pull back my Witch Realm units to go in and around. Don't know what my allies are doing at this point. Again, I would definitely recommend they wait until Master Blaster's... Actually, no, Master Blaster is back. He's moving his army. So he's the only one that has an army capable of taking on the frontal defense at this point in terms of numbers. And I'm going to move my Witch Realm units to go around. Both my Witch Realm units will be the flanking force. And then this sort of little squad over here is going to continue to try and chase down the cavalry and try and deal with it. And unfortunately I didn't get my Gundabad Guard into loose, which means they're going to get half their unit cut to pieces. Actually no, that wasn't terrible, I guess. But they still took some pretty decent losses, and actually they did manage to kill 2 more Kingsguard. Fuck the Kingsguard, indeed. A unit of 12, and that would still be enough to cycle charge this force to death. So I'm sort of moving my Witch Realm units around, and they're going to go up and around the mountain pass route. Well into the final 10,000 frames now. We can see Master Blaster's army finally, can he make up for his failure and his abandoning of the front? Or will we have to shoot him for desertion? You can see I'm going to have to... Interestingly enough, there is another point I have to make in this battle, but I will get onto that a little bit later on. And that can be the lesson of the day, something that I used to like doing. But for the time being, the lesson of the day is, if you can bring cavalry because it will win you the battle most of the time. The only time it doesn't is when your opponent brings tons and tons of pikes and sort of anti-cavalry skirmishers like crossbows. Yeah, here we go. Interestingly enough, the tournament is in the semi-final stage as I say this, and I'm pleased to say that I have to support Creed to win the tournament by default, because we had sort of 3 little games where he wanted to do some 1v1s, and I said sure, I'll do it, and he beat the snot out of me in all 3 of them. Well, actually, I guess the second one was pretty close, but in the other 2 he creamed me with ease. So based on the fact that he was able to defeat me so easily, I have to hope that he wins the tournament, so he's the best player on the Discord. But yes, here we go. There's the Elder King's Guard. Of course, I'm a little rusty at the moment. I need to shake off the cobwebs, which is why I'm showing more battles with me in them. I need to get back into it, because I had got into a bit of a rut of me showing battles that I wasn't in. But here we go, finally we have the frontline fight. Something else to behold other than me getting killed by cavalry. The Morannon bows going in first, so yeah, there's a lot of numbers here, but ultimately we're having to force our way through Here and Ek spearmen. And that's bad tidings. The Here and Ek are going to be excellent at holding their line against the orcs, and of course they're being backed up by dwarven noblemen, which offer the mass that they need. And of course we're also fighting on a very steep incline, so the elven position is pretty safe there. Up here though, the incline is a little less harsh, and Tundra's Fox is charging in his heavy goblin infantry to take the brunt of the damage from the Here-E Lang. But there is also this unit, which is, thus far I think it has taken a few losses from skirmish fire. I think it took some losses from crossbows very early on, but other than that you can essentially think of this as a completely fresh unit of Elder Palace Guard. And the Temple Inquisitors are still alive, but they have, yeah, there's 78 of them over here, but they've also seen battle, and several of them are considerably bloodied up. And they're also going up the very steep part of the incline, which I'm not sure I would agree with. Nonetheless, what's going on over here? It's the cavalry just being chased down, just tying up some loose ends around the battlefield. We can see what's going on over here. There's something over here. What is it? You can actually hear dog sound effects in the town as well, so maybe my dog barking in the background wasn't so bad after all. Let's go back over to the Woodland Realms in what I will lovingly name Death Summit. Look at this. Look at this defensive position. The frame rate going a little bit to hell, but that's fine. Hang on a moment. I want to get another screenshot and hope it doesn't crash. Is it? No, actually, it's not worth it. Not worth it. You can see over here the Goblin Infantry and the Black Uruk Warband charging forth. And you can see actually over here that I realised we were not going to win that fight front on. So I decided to run my Witch Realm Blackguard up the hill, because in a hill like this, your troops take forever to get up it if you walk them. However, this does mean that my Witch Realm units are winded and tired before they ever get into the battle. And if you can help it, I mean, I couldn't really do anything about that here because we needed them in the battle anyway. But if you can at all help it, you really don't want to just charge forward your men and get them tired out, because it will make a big difference. And a fight that they would have won if they were fresh will turn into a fight that they will lose pretty handily if they're tired. I mean, fatigue is usually something that, particularly in Medieval 2, because it's sort of more... Oh, you can see the Elder King's Guard in the background. Particularly in Medieval 2, because of how it's a little bit slower paced. You can see a nice catapult shot. The fatigue is something that you don't often see in full effect, but here you will. Spoilers, of course, because of course these Elder Palace Guards still fully fresh, and this flank was crushed. The heavy Goblin Infantry was no match at all. The Orc Bodyguards will do slightly better, but they'll still handily lose. The Moran on Uruks will be needed, but you can see that our line is it's starting to look like we're not going to be able to do much here. The Elder King's Guard is cycle charging into the rear against the heavy Goblin Halberdiers. And of course that's the problem with sending my infantry against the cavalry. It just wasn't able to keep up. This Elder Royal Guard retreating back down here, the Hin E Dower. And now you can see that we have fallen behind by quite a bit. As we're sort of approaching the final phase of this battle, the hill assault. Things are looking poor for us. The Dwarven noblemen. The last alliance is holding firm. The Elder King's Guard, I mean, they are now starting to fall away finally, that they're in sustained melee with the Orc Bodyguards, but their damage has already been done. The Woodland Realms kill count has been padded quite effectively by them. You can see that there are heavy Goblin Archers in the background, there are Moran on bows. How are the Temple Inquisitors doing? Over here, actually, things are looking a little better. Defeat does still seem certain for the Temple Inquisitors, though, because they are exhausted and they're fighting fresh Elder Royal Guard with their armor piercing, and they are also going up against Elder Royal Council. So yeah, that's another good example of fatigue being an issue. Of course, the Temple Inquisitors have already taken some significant losses before now as well, but the fatigue is a factor, and the elves are going to be able to take advantage of that. Our really heavy hitting unit, the Temple Inquisitors, not going to be able to get much done. And here we go, we can see that my units are also tired. I'm going to try and get the Witch Realm Blackguard into the back ranks, because we need to sort of attack over here. And you can hear that my army is tiring. Again, I don't really have much of an army left at this point. And I'm going to try and get a downhill, you know, the Witch Realm Hammer Guard are very tired. They have worse fatigue levels than the Blackguard. And I'm going to try and get a downhill charge into these Dwarf Noblemen, which is traditionally something which would destroy them. The Witch Realm Hammer Guard are an excellent armor-piercing unit, and off the charge, they are one of the best units, but you can see that they are very slow because they're tired. And this is not going to be a very effective charge at all. I don't know why they do that. I don't know why units, they sort of stop and only the front line of the unit charges in to get the charge bonus. It's kind of stupid, but it's been present since forever, so I mean, I don't really know why it does that. You can see that the defeat is a distinct possibility for the Hammer Guard, simply because the Dwarven Noblemen are fresh and the Hammer Guard are very tired. And if we turn around, my flanking force of Witch Realm Blackguard was immediately intercepted by Elder Royal Guard and Hin E Dower, and now the thing that will break the straw, well, not the straw, but the anvil that will break the camel's back is this unit of Elder Royal Council. The Elder Royal Council pulling out their elven curved blades. Actually, they still have ammunition, so I think they're just going to shoot me. Or are they? No, they're going to get into melee. Good for them. I mean, they're obviously going to win against my Witch Realm Blackguard at this point, which is honestly one of my favourite units in the game. I've had them do very well for me in the past, but this time they find themselves thoroughly outclassed. I do have what was left of my cavalry hunting expeditionary force, and actually there goes Azog, so he was killed very quickly. Again, they're just arriving now, but they're very tired, they're all exhausted, and also the amount of men that they're going to offer to the front line is not going to be something which is going to turn this battle around. So yeah, at this point, our doom is rather obvious. We're down. We're down by 7%.
The tide of battle seems to have turned against us. We must act and halt this turn of events.
Indeed. And this is the power of the Woodland Realms at their full strength. Commit it to memory, for it will be fleeting. This will not be how strong they are in the next patch. You can see over here, the Elder Palace Guard, they've barely lost anything on the front line. They're carving through heavy goblin units. And interestingly enough, we also have these Forest Shell captains from WK managing to get back into the fight, managing to recharge the Orc bodyguard of Tundra's Fox. And his general actually lasted longer than mine, amusingly, despite the fact he was in battle for far longer. The Hammer Guard, not able to get the damage done against the dwarfs. Been playing a bit of Warhammer lately. And then over here we have the Witch Realm Blackguard. Just the best that Gundabad has to offer, being surrounded and cut to pieces by the Elder Royal Council and the Elder Royal Guard. All of that armor piercing, all of that melee skill. My general died some time ago. And here we go, we're approaching the final 2500 frames now. Again, in a sort of last ditch effort. I'm just going to commit everything to melee front on. What's left of my Gundabad Guard, getting into the front line here. Multiple HP spearmen usually, but their hit points have largely been destroyed. And there goes Master Blaster's general. The Temple Inquisitors also beginning to really struggle on their front. Also getting some Guardians of Khan Doom up here. My Witch Realm Scourge Raiders lagging behind a little bit. So what do we have over here? Actually no, I think it was the Temple Guard that the general was in. No, it is the Inquisitors. How about that? Yeah, you can see the power of the Woodland Realms infantry, able to sweep away. There goes Dane, though. Dane was killed by a hammerer. Did that orc just say, oh no? But yes. Good to see at least one of their generals is gone. Well, actually, WK's general died pretty early, to be honest with you, but I don't think we're... Did Thranduil... Oh no, all the generals are dead now, aren't they? How about that? No general survives. These Mordor Moran bows being charged down the hill and engaged by these elven spears. What else do we have? Well, at least it's a target close enough for my Witch Realm Scourge Raiders to get into melee with. And they've definitely been my most impressive unit in this battle. You can see where the line was and where it broke. Now the Woodland Realms, after finishing off the Temple Inquisitors, charging down the hill. Really up here is where the majority of what's left of our resistance is. I've still got some hammerers. My ally still has some heavy goblin halberdiers. Amusingly, I've still got orc marauders, which I charged into battle against the Elder Palace Guard, because why not? At this point, what difference does it make? The Gundabad Guard. The healthiest elite unit I have left. And then over here we have some Guardians of Khan Doom, mixed in with the orc bodyguards of my general, as we sort of make our final stand. So yeah, the dwarves and Eriador took more losses than the Woodland Realms, obviously, because they had to face the brunt of our forces in the settlement. But the Woodland Realms able to save their elites for the end, defend this hilltop position, and they were able to, yeah, they were just able to straight up outlast us. And of course, I think that this settlement, well, this scenario, for a first draft, essentially, is probably one of the best that Horton has made in terms of balance, simply because when the new patch comes out and the Woodland Realms are toned down just a little bit, I can't help but feel like this would be like right down to the wire all the time. So I think that this scenario is actually probably good enough to stay as it is until the next patch, to be honest with you. Obviously Gundabad will be toned down as well, but I didn't have any Rudauer units, so interestingly enough I don't think Gundabad's army would change all that much in this scenario anyway. My Gundabad Guard doing their best. The poor guys. They're essentially dismounted Bolgs champions. Their unit model looks a little natty. It doesn't make them any less decent in melee, but not quite decent enough. You can see there the Elder Royal Council. I really like the Elder Royal Council and how they look. And the Elder Royal Guard. The Woodland Realms in general are a very good looking faction. There's just a bad taste in my mouth whenever I play them, because very rarely in a 1v1 will you win with the Woodland Realms because of your own skill. But this is not the era of complaining, this is the era of happy times. Elder Royal Council. But yes, this was a very fun scenario. I think this is one of the better ones that Horton has made, I think. and I was very glad to be a part of it. And interestingly enough, I do have another Horton scenario, which I got sent. I wasn't a part of that one, on Runic Camp. I also have another one on Thranduil's Hordes, but I will hold off on that one for a little bit because I've already covered that map quite a lot lately, and that one does tend to turn into a one choke point fight because the first defensive position is so good the defenders have no reason to give it up. So I will hold fire on that one a little bit. But also, as promised, I will do Winter Edoras soon, but the longer that I leave that, the more festive it is. The Gundabad Guard are fighting to the death, the Orc Bodyguards are routing, and that is it. So it is mostly elves. I don't know if WK had any men remaining. I think he did. Yeah, he does. He's got a couple of Forest Shell captains, 3 men, and then the Dwarven Noblemen, and then the rest of it Thranduil's finest. So here we go. The defenders win. The defenders win in a 3v5. That's something you don't hear too often. And it wasn't just a steamroll either, by either side. I think that we could have done a little bit better, to be honest with you. We could have made more use of our armour piercing against the dwarves. But ultimately, I think that the Woodman Realms would be too strong for us to overcome. Captain Burrs is apparently that's apparently an elf name. But yes, he got the most kills. He nearly got 8,000. The dwarves nearly getting 7,000, and the Eriador player WK nearly getting 6,000. Of our armies, again, this Mordor force getting the most kills. That I don't know who that would be actually, based on the kills. I think that might be. It could be Master Blaster or Stewed Fungus, to be honest with you. This 787 here was Froggy because, of course, he had to deal with the Woodland Realms archers from the beginning of the match. Having a look at my forces, of course, Witch Realm Scourge Raiders were both the units which cracked 100, which in terms of an attacking unit is very good. The rest of my army, however, really struggled. The Witch Realm Hammer Guard only getting 34. Trolls of Gundabad doing quite well for themselves. They did well until they get charged. Where are we here? Where's the Witch Realm Blackguard? Well, the Guardians of Khan Doom didn't do too well. The Witch Realm Blackguard only 58. That unit of Orc Marauders got 142. It was the one that was with the Scourge Raiders in that one choke point. That's very good for a unit of Orc Marauders on the attack. And the Black Uruks of the Mountains doing decently considering they were in a fight which they were never really meant to win. So yeah, that was a very nice Horton scenario indeed. I've got more of them in the chamber, as it were, ready to go. And also I have the Wintry Edoras map. If I can get the Wintry Minas Tirith map working, we will also see that, but we'll see. I mean, I might have to turn the graphics down and see how it goes, but maybe. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.